Section 5 of Mythology by Jane Ellen Harrison. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Artemis. The figure of Artemis is in a sense more primitive than that of either Athena or Aphrodite. She is nearer akin to the Lady of the Wild Things. Her local cults are not without traces of primitive savagery. Pausanias tells us of a yearly holocaust offered to Artemis at Patrae, which exactly resembled that of the Great Mother at Hierapolis. After describing the altar surrounded by a circle of green logs of wood, and approached by an inclined plane made of earth, he tells of the procession of the virgin priestess in a car drawn by deer. Of the sacrifice itself, he says it was not merely a state affair, but popular among private people. Quote, "For they bring and cast upon the altar living things of all sorts, both edible birds and all manner of victims, also wild boars and deer and fawns, and some even bring the cubs of wolves and bears, and other full-grown beasts. I saw indeed a bear and other beasts struggling to get out of the first force of the flames, and escaping by sheer strength. But those who threw them in dragged them up again onto the fire. I never heard of anyone being wounded by the wild beasts." End quote. Even in the civilized days of Pausanias, the service of the huntress maid was horrible and bloodthirsty. It is well, perhaps, for once to realize from what imminent savagery the Olympian divinities had emerged. Compare this with the ritual of the Great Mother at Hierapolis, as observed by Pausanias. In the court of the sanctuary were kept all manner of beasts and birds. Quote, "Consecrated oxen, horses, eagles, bears, and lions who never hurt anyone, but are holy and tame to handle." End quote. But these tame holy beasts were kept for a horrid purpose. Lucian thus describes the Holocaust. Quote, "Of all the festivals, the greatest that I know of they hold at the beginning of the spring. Some call it the pyre, and some the torch. At this festival they do as follows. They cut down great trees and set them up in the courtyard. Then they bring sheep and goats and other live beasts, and hang them up on the trees. They also bring birds and clothes and vessels of gold and silver. When they have made all ready, they carry the victims round the trees, and set fire to them, and straightway they are all burned." End quote. And again, at Messina, Pausanias saw the same horrid ritual. He tells us of, quote, "a hall of the Quirites, where they sacrifice without distinction all animals, beginning with oxen and goats, and ending with birds. They throw them all into the fire." End quote. And who are the Quirites? Who but the young men, the ministrants of the Great Mother? The sacrifice at Messini to Laphria is scarcely less horrible than that of Taurus, where the local goddess demanded human blood. Against this the latter conscience of Greece revolted. Euripides, in Iphigenia in Taurus, makes Iphigenia, doomed to sacrifice her brother, cry out against Artemis. "Herself doth drink this blood of slaughtered men? Could ever Leto, she of the great king beloved, be mother to so gross a thing? These tales be false, false as those feastlings wild of Tantalus, and gods that love a child. This land of murderers to its god hath given its own lust. Evil dwelleth not in heaven." Again the leader of the chorus protests that human sacrifice is no Greek offering, and thus adjures the goddess. "O Holy One, if it afford thee joy, what these men bring to thee, take thou their sacrifice, which we by law of Hellas hold abhorred." Artemis herself, the story went, had substituted in her sacrifice a fawn for the maiden Iphigenia. Iphigenia cries, "Tell him that Artemis my soul did save, I wot not how, and to the altar gave a fawn instead, the which my father slew, not seeing, deeming that the sword he drew struck me. But she had borne me far away, and left me in this land." These substitution stories, the fawn for Iphigenia, the ram for Isaac, all mark the transition from human to animal sacrifice. The next rite, though very primitive, shows Artemis in gentler guise. On the Acropolis at Athens was a precinct of Artemis Brauronia, and in it an image made by Praxiteles. Within this precinct went on the Arctea, or bear service. In the Lysistrata of Aristophanes, the chorus of women sing of the benefits they have received from the state, and how they were reared at its expense. As soon as I was 7 years old, I became an erephoros. Then when I was 10, I was grinder to our sovereign lady. Then, wearing the saffron robe, I was a bear in the Braurorian festival. In Arcadia, it does not surprise us to find that Artemis herself, bearing the euphemistic title of Callisti, the fairest, was a bear, nor that one of her faithless worshippers was turned into a bear. Among the rude dwellers in Arcadia, a bear may well have been a creature greatly to be dreaded, and most eagerly to be propitiated. But in the Christian era, to find in civilized Athens on her sacred hill a bear cult is a striking instance of the tenacity of ancient tradition. The precinct must have been a strange sight. The little girls of Athens, wrapped in yellow bearskins, would dance or crouch bear fashion before the goddess. A goat was sacrificed to Artemis, and till the next festival the little girls were safe from marriage. They had accomplished their bear service. After a while it would seem they got shy of the rude ritual, since by the time of Aristophanes, for the bearskin was substituted a saffron robe, and henceforth we hear more of the dedication of raiment than the dancing of bears. But always these well-born, well-bred little Athenian girls who danced as bears to Artemis must to the end of their days have thought reverently of the might of the great she-bear. Among the Apaches today, we are told, quote, "Only ill-bred Americans or Europeans who have never had any raising would think of speaking of the bear, or indeed even of the snake, without employing the reverential prefix Austin, meaning old one, the equivalent of the Roman senator." End quote. The first time I visited Athens, I was turning over the fragments in the Acropolis Museum, then little more than a lumber room. In a rubbish pile in the corner of the room, I had the great happiness to light on a small stone figure of a bear. One furry paw was sticking out and caught my eye. Some maiden, richer or more pious than the rest, had offered to the goddess this image of herself, a small bear comfortably seated on its hind legs. Precisely where the bear was discovered I failed to find out, but originally she must have been set up in the Braurorian precinct. It seems probable that from the Holocaust service arose the figure of the huntress Artemis. She, in whose honor the wild and tame beasts were slain, became herself the slayer. In Homer, uniformly, Artemis is the huntress. When the Caledonians fail to bring their hecatomb, it is the archer goddess who was wroth and sent against them a creature of heaven, a fierce wild boar, white-tusked, that wrought sore ill continually on Oeneus' garden land. And it is the maiden huntress of Caledon that the chorus in the Atalanta hail. Come with bows bent, and with emptying of quivers, maiden most perfect, lady of light, with the noise of winds and many rivers, with a clamour of waters, and with might. Bind on thy sandals, O thou most fleet, over the splendour and speed of thy feet. For the faint east quickens, the wan west shivers, round the feet of the day and the feet of the night. It may surprise us perhaps that a woman goddess is chosen by the Greeks to be the huntsman in chief. Assuredly the cloistered Greek women did not, modern fashion, join the chase. But the difficulty disappears if we remember that the aspect of huntress was taken over from the lady of the wild things, and probably by way of the Holocaust. Artemis is not only slayer of the wild beasts, she shares with Apollo the ministry of death to mortals. In the Odyssey, Homer tells of the fair isle of Syria, a good land, with oxen and with sheep well stored, and laden vines and cornfields deep, and hunger never comes upon the folk, nor sore diseases that make mortals weep. But to the tribes of men, when old they grow therein, the archer of the silver bow, Apollo, comes with Artemis, and thus with shafts that hurt not strikes and lays them low. Artemis may have her aspect as death-dealer to women, merely as the correlative of Apollo. On the other hand, it is perhaps more likely that she here reflects the darker underworld side of the Earth Mother. One aspect of Artemis is undoubtedly that of the moon. It should be observed that as soon as the Greeks or any other people come to realize that the seasons are controlled by the moon and sun, and that their food supply is therefore influenced by these potencies, they tend to let their earth divinities take on certain attributes of sun and moon. The worship of the moon naturally precedes that of the sun, because the appearances and disappearances of the moon, being at shorter intervals, naturally first arrest attention. The old error of naturism was to suppose that sun or moon exhausted the whole contents of a god or goddess. The new psychology points out that into the content of man's experiences, and hence into his expression of that experience in the figures of his divinities, there enter at a certain stage of civilization elements drawn not only from the earth, but from the heavenly bodies, from sun and moon, and first, it would seem, from moon. The moon is an arresting object, a thing of spectral terror, staring with dull, pitiless eye. Setebos, Setebos, and Setebos, thinketh he dwelleth in the cold of the moon. Phoebus is still for us the sun. Hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings, and Phoebus gins her eyes. And who is Phoebe, Artemis, but the moon with silver bow? So Swinburne's huntsman addresses her in the Atalanta in Calydon. Maiden and mistress of the months and stars, now folded in the flowerless fields of heaven. And again in the chorus, when the hounds of spring are on a winter's traces, the mother of months, in meadow or plain, fills the shadow in windy places with lisp of leaves and ripple of rain. The moon has her dark and spectral side, but this is taken over by Hecate, leaving the brightness for Artemis. Hecate is compact of magic and spells. In the second idyll of Theocritus, we have the picture of Samatha, the magician. Samatha, who in the anguish of her slighted love, invokes Hecate, who is also Artemis, and seeks to lure her lover back by incantations with the magic wheel on which is bound the lynx, the wryneck. The scene is fitly laid in the moonlight. Samatha sings, "Lo, now the barley smoulders in the flame. Thestylus wretch, thy wits are wool-gathering. Am I a laughing-stock, to thee a shame? Scatter the grain, I say, the while I sing. The bones of Delphus I am scattering. Bird, magic bird, bring the man back to me. Next do I burn this wax, God helping me. So may the heart of Delphus melted be. This brazen wheel I whirl, so as before, restless may he be whirled about my door. Bird, magic bird, bring the man home to me. Next will I burn these husks. O Artemis, hast power hell's adamant to shatter down and every stubborn thing. Hark, Thestylus, Hecate's hounds are baying up the town. The goddess at the crossways, clash the gong. Lo, now the sea is still, the winds are still, the ache within my heart is never still." In the Hippolytus of Euripides, Artemis is all huntress maiden, and as such she is sworn foe to Aphrodite. It is Aphrodite who speaks the prologue, and the whole speech is charged with the never-dying hatred of the voluptuary for the ascetic. Great among men, and not unnamed am I, the Cyprian, in God's inmost halls on high, and wheresoe'er from Pontus to the far red west men dwell, and see the glad day-star, and worship me, the pious heart I bless, and wreck the life that lives in stubbornness. And then she tells how Hippolytus, reared in straight ways, scorns her, and hath dared, alone of all Troyzen, to hold me least of spirits and most mean, and spurns my spell and seeks no woman's kiss. But great Apollo's sister Artemis he holds of all most high, gives love and praise, and through the wild dark woods for ever strays, he and the maid together with swift hounds to slay all angry beasts from out those bounds. And as the goddess leaves the stage, enter Hippolytus with his huntsman, and Hippolytus sings, Follow, oh follow me, singing on your ways, her in whose hand are we, her whose own flock we be, the Zeus child, the heavenly, to Artemis be praise. And the huntsmen make answer, Hail to thee, maiden blessed, proudest and holiest, God's daughter, great in bliss, Leto-born Artemis. Hail to thee, maiden, far fairest of all that are, yea, and most high thine home, child of the Father's hall. Here, O most virginal, here, O most fair of all, in high God's golden dome. Artemis in the Hippolytus is austere to the point of inhumanity, but her maidenhood can take on a gentler and more homely aspect. An epigram from the anthology shows clearly and simply how in the worship the maidenhood of the worshipper was mirrored. Maid of the mere, Timarete here brings, before she weds, her symbols, her dear ball to thee, a maid, her maiden offerings, her snood, her maiden dolls, their clothes and all. Hold, Leto's child, above Timarete thine hand, and keep her virginal like thee. Note the before she weds. It was no perpetual virginity that she vowed. There is a passage in the Hippolytus which points to an aspect of Artemis quite other than that of the virgin huntress, and it is of the first importance for the full understanding of her nature. When the huntsmen have ended their chant, Hippolytus himself advances to the shrine of Artemis, with a wreath in his hand. Arrian, in his treatise on hunting, tells us that hunters must pay homage to Artemis Agroterra, she of the wild, must pour libation, crown her, sing hymns, and offer first fruits of the game taken, and must also crown their dogs, and that dogs and masters must feast together. Hippolytus does not stay to crown his dogs, but straightway invokes the goddess thus: Mine own, my one desire, virgin most fair of all the virgin choir. Hail, O most pure, most perfect, loveliest one. Lo, in my hand I bear, woven for the circling of thy long gold hair, cold leaves and flowers from places which the sun in spring long shines upon, where never shepherd hath driven flock to graze, nor any grass is mown, but there sound through all the sunny sweet warm days, mid the green holy place, the wild bees wing alone. And maiden reverence tends the fair things there, and watereth all of them with sprinkled showers. Whoso is chaste of spirit utterly may gather there the leaves and fruits and flowers, the unchaste never. But thou, O goddess, and dearest love of mine, take and about thine hair this anadem entwine, take and for my sake wear. Great stress is laid, of course, on the purity and sanctity of the garland, and the place whence it was culled. It is clear, I think, that the place was a garden enclosed, and the gardens of the ancients were not so much gardens for flowers and fruits as enclosures for the growing of medicinal herbs. Medea had such a garden, full of laurel and asphodel and mandragora and all heal and the like. Sophocles wrote a play which is lost to us, called The Root Cutters, and in it he described Medea cutting her evil herbs by moonlight. Such herbs were good for medicine or for magic. The two in those days were not far asunder. Dr. Rendell Harris, in his fascinating Ascent of Olympus, has drawn attention to the importance of these herbal gardens in ancient religion, and he tells us the very herb to which Artemis owes her name, the Artemisia, a wormwood sometimes called mugwort. Garlands were made on St. John's Eve of this and other magic herbs, and they possess the power of dispelling daimons. On a manuscript of the 11th century, Artemis is figured presenting the mugwort to Chiron, the centaur. The herb Artemisia grew abundantly on Mount Taygetus, the favorite haunt of Artemis. 2 strands, it would seem, have gone to the making of the goddess, the Earth Mother from the south, and the maid magician, the healer of the north. End of chapter 6. End of section 5.